Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed that some people only realize your value after you are no longer available to be used, ignored, or taken for granted? Have you ever watched someone walk away from your presence as if you were ordinary, only for life to sit them down in the quiet of the night and remind them what they lost? That is one of the strangest truths in human life. People do not always recognize gold when they are holding it. Sometimes they treat diamonds like dust. Sometimes they confuse your patience for weakness, your loyalty for convenience, and your silence for lack of depth. And then one day you are gone, not in anger, not in drama, not with a scene, but in dignity. And that is when the lesson begins. They lost you, and now they feel it every night. Not every loss announces itself with sirens. Some losses arrive quietly, like a candle going out in a dark room. At first, there is denial. Then comes distraction. Then comes the noise of pretending. But the night has a way of stripping away the performance. When the world gets quiet, when the phone stops lighting up, when the room feels larger than the heart can handle, the truth starts speaking. And truth is a patient teacher. It waits until the mask falls off. It waits until the music stops. It waits until a person is finally alone with their own thoughts. And in that silence, they begin to feel the space you left behind. But tonight, I did not come to talk only about what they feel. I came to talk about what you must feel. I came to talk about the kind of person who no longer measures their worth by another person's attention. I came to talk about the kind of soul that stops begging to be chosen and starts choosing themselves. I came to talk about the man or woman who has reached the edge of emotional exhaustion and says, enough. Enough of proving, enough of chasing, enough of shrinking, enough of waiting to be appreciated by people who only notice you when you are gone, enough of handing your peace to those who never earned the right to hold it. Because listen to me carefully, your life cannot be built on the shifting opinions of people who do not know how to keep their word, cannot protect your heart, and cannot honor your worth. If your confidence depends on applause, then your peace will always be fragile. If your identity depends on being wanted, then your soul will always be vulnerable. If your joy depends on being understood by everyone, then you will live exhausted, because there will always be people who misunderstand greatness until greatness is no longer in front of them. There is a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they are going to live as a reflection of other people's approval or as an expression of their own inner truth. And that moment changes everything. It changes how you walk. It changes how you speak. It changes how you love. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you no longer apologize for. Because once self-respect enters the room, desperation leaves. Once dignity takes root, begging becomes impossible. Once your spirit remembers who it is, you stop chasing shadows and start walking in light. Some of you have spent too long trying to be unforgettable to people who only had memory for convenience. You gave your time, your tenderness, your understanding, your energy, your loyalty, and still it was never enough for those who were committed to misunderstanding you. You kept explaining yourself to people who had already decided to misread your heart. You kept trying to earn a place in lives where your presence was treated like background noise. And every time you lowered yourself to fit into a place that could not hold your value, a little piece of your own spirit got tired. But today, let this truth settle deep in your bones. You do not have to keep auditioning for roles in the lives of people who were never prepared to honor your worth. You are not a substitute. You are not a convenience. You are not a temporary fix for somebody's loneliness. You are not a backup plan, a rainy day option, or a name to call when all other names fail to answer. You are a full human being with a heart, a mind, a future, and a destiny. And the day you begin to see yourself that way, the whole architecture of your life starts to shift. There is something powerful that happens when a person stops seeking approval and starts seeking alignment. Approval is fragile. Alignment is strong. Approval can be given and taken away by the mood of others. Alignment comes from a clear conscience, a disciplined life, and a heart that knows where it stands. Approval says, do they like me? Alignment says, am I living right? Approval asks, am I enough for them? Alignment asks, am I becoming enough for the calling on my life? That is a different question. That is a higher question. That is the question that builds character when no one is watching. And character is built in private long before it is admired in public. Do not underestimate the nights when nobody claps for you. Do not underestimate the hours when it feels like your efforts are invisible. Do not underestimate the quiet seasons when you are doing the right thing and nobody seems to notice. Those are the seasons that shape the steel in you. That is where discipline is born. That is where emotional independence is forged. That is where your soul learns not to panic when validation is absent. Because the truth is, if you cannot stand alone, you will be knocked down by every changing opinion. If you cannot sit in silence without needing someone's message to calm your heart, then your emotions are still in a cage. If you cannot wake up and move forward without being reassured by somebody else that you matter, then you have given too much of your life away. Emotional independence is not coldness. It is not pride. It is not acting like you do not care. It is the sacred ability to remain steady even when people are unpredictable. It is knowing that your worth does not rise and fall with somebody's praise or silence. And let me tell you something. The people who will truly value you are never asking you to betray yourself to keep them. They do not require you to become smaller to make them comfortable. They do not demand your spirit as the price of their presence. Real love does not ask you to disappear. Real respect does not ask you to beg. Real connection does not require your humiliation. If you must constantly prove your value, then the relationship is already teaching you something. If you must constantly explain your soul, then your soul is not being received. And if you are always the one reaching, always the one calling, always the one carrying, always the one adjusting, then you are not in mutuality. You are in survival. And survival is not the same as living. There are people who mistake endurance for destiny. They stay in places that slowly drain them because they are afraid of change. They remain in conversations that repeatedly wound them because they fear being alone. They sit in the shadows of other people's indifference because it feels easier than walking out into the unknown. But listen closely. A life spent surviving the disrespect of others is not a life fully lived. You were not born to be tolerated. You were born to be respected. You were not born to shrink into silence. You were born to rise with strength. You were not born to keep swallowing pain just because leaving requires courage. Courage is exactly what your life is asking for. And courage begins when you stop confusing familiarity with faithfulness. Some people are familiar, but not faithful. Familiarity can sit in the same room with betrayal. Familiarity can smile while ignoring your pain. Familiarity can call you every day and still never truly see you. Faithfulness, on the other hand, honors your soul even when it is inconvenient. Faithfulness speaks the truth even when the truth costs something. Faithfulness does not require performance. And if what you have been calling love has been draining your dignity, then perhaps it was only familiarity wearing a mask. Now let us talk about discipline, because discipline is one of the most underrated forms of self-respect in the world. Discipline is what says, I will not let my emotions run my entire life. Discipline is what says, I will not eat the fruit of regret just because I am hungry for comfort. Discipline is what says, I will get up again. I will work again. I will build again. I will learn again. I will not let one rejection become the definition of my future. That is discipline. Discipline is not glamorous. It does not always feel exciting. It often feels like showing up when no one is watching and doing the work that your feelings are trying to postpone. But discipline is freedom in work clothes. The disciplined person does not need every day to feel good in order to do good. The disciplined person understands that progress is often hidden at first. A seed does not shout before it becomes a tree. A river does not complain before it reaches the ocean. A mountain does not ask permission to stand tall. It simply stands. And that is how your life will change too. Not with one dramatic moment alone, but with repeated choices, small choices, quiet choices, daily choices. The choice to wake up with purpose. The choice to speak with restraint. The choice to keep your standards high. The choice to stop reacting to every provocation. The choice to spend your energy where it can grow something beautiful. And purpose makes all of that easier. When a person has no purpose, they are easily consumed by opinions. They are blown around by every emotional wind. They sit at the mercy of other people's moods because they have no internal anchor. But when purpose takes root, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing every person who walks away because you realize your life is bigger than one person's inability to see you. You stop attaching your value to temporary attention because you know you were made for something deeper. You stop begging doors to open because you are too busy building your own path. Purpose changes the texture of a life. It takes scattered energy and gives it direction. It takes pain and gives it meaning. It takes rejection and turns it into redirection. Ask yourself, what happens to a person who knows why they are here? They become dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to insecurity. Dangerous to self-pity. Dangerous to manipulation. Dangerous to the chains that used to hold them. When you know your purpose, you stop being available for nonsense. When you know your purpose, you stop romanticizing what is destroying you. When you know your purpose, you no longer need every room to affirm you because your mission is already affirming you. There is a difference between being loved and being validated. Love sees your soul and calls it precious. Validation often only sees your usefulness and calls it convenient. Love is steady. Validation is fickle. Love stays when the lights are dim. Validation disappears when your shine no longer serves someone's ego. That is why the hunger for validation can become such a trap. It teaches you to live outside yourself. It teaches you to become a performer in your own life. It teaches you to ask, was I enough? After every conversation, every text, every silence, every delay, every reaction. But no human heart was made to survive on a diet of endless approval. At some point, you have to nourish yourself with truth. And the truth is this: you do not need to be chosen by everyone, to be chosen by destiny. You do not need to be applauded by everyone to be walking in integrity. You do not need to be visible to everyone to be valuable. You do not need to explain your growth to people committed to misunderstanding your process. Growth is often lonely at the beginning. Growth can feel like loss to the version of you that wanted comfort more than transformation. But every season of real growth asks for something. It asks for habits, not hype. It asks for consistency, not conversation. It asks for patience, not panic. There is a reason the old version of you struggles to recognize the new version of you. Because growth does not always arrive in loud clothing. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the form of a boundary you finally set, in the form of a message you did not send, in the form of a relationship you no longer chase, in the form of a standard you finally refuse to lower, in the form of a morning routine no one sees, in the form of a prayer whispered when your heart is tired, in the form of a plan made while your feelings are still catching up. That is growth. Not just surviving what hurt you, but becoming someone stronger because of it. And the strongest people are often those who have learned not to beg for what should be freely given. Let me tell you a story in spirit, if not in name. Imagine a man who spent years pouring himself into people who only valued him when they needed something. He was the one who listened, the one who supported, the one who stayed late, the one who forgave quickly, the one who gave second chances and third chances, and then a dozen more after that. He thought his loyalty would eventually make him indispensable. But instead, it made him easily accessible. He kept giving and calling and hoping and waiting. And every time he was overlooked, he told himself that love required patience. But one night, after another empty exchange, he sat in silence and felt something break open in him. Not his heart, his illusion. He realized that he was not being loyal to love. He was being loyal to a fantasy. He was not holding on to commitment. He was holding on to the fear of being alone. And once he saw that clearly, he started changing. He stopped chasing what was draining him. He started building his own life again. He started showing up for himself with the same energy he had once poured into everyone else. He slept better. He thought clearer. He walked taller. He became harder to manipulate because he became harder to define from the outside. That is what happens when a person comes back home to themselves. And the same can happen for you. You do not need to remain a hostage to old emotions just because they were once intense. Intensity is not always truth. Some of the strongest emotional attachments are not healthy at all. They are simply familiar wounds rehearsing themselves over and over. A person can feel deeply and still be deeply mistaken. A person can miss what hurt them. A person can ache for what was never safe. So do not confuse longing with destiny. Do not confuse attachment with purpose. Do not confuse silence with maturity. And do not confuse your fear of starting over with evidence that you should stay where you are. Starting over is not proof of failure. It is proof of courage. Sometimes starting over means rebuilding your identity after too much of it was invested in somebody else's approval. Sometimes it means relearning how to enjoy your own company. Sometimes it means discovering that peace is more nourishing than attention. Sometimes it means walking away from a crowd that kept clapping for a version of you that was exhausted. And yes, it can be painful to let go. Of course it can. But pain is not always a sign that you are losing something good. Sometimes pain is the sound of an unhealthy attachment finally loosening its grip. Do you know what many people fear most? They fear the empty space that follows the exit. They fear the stillness that comes after the noise of dysfunction. They fear the first nights without the familiar pattern. They fear the new routine, the new silence, the new self. But the empty space is not your enemy. It is your workshop. It is where you will rebuild. It is where you will hear your own thoughts clearly again. It is where your intuition gets louder. It is where your standards become visible. It is where you stop living on autopilot and start living by design. And once you begin living by design, you become harder to control. That is why discipline matters. Discipline protects your future from your impulse. Discipline protects your peace from your appetite. Discipline protects your mission from your insecurity. Discipline says, I will not surrender tomorrow for temporary comfort today. Discipline says, I will not trade my standards for a moment of attention. Discipline says, I will not destroy my future just because I feel lonely right now. That is wisdom. That is maturity. That is strength. There are many people who want a better life, but refuse the habits that create one. They want confidence, but they will not do the work of building it. They want peace, but they keep visiting chaos. They want purpose, but they keep wasting time in resentment. They want respect, but they do not respect their own boundaries. They want to be seen, but they hide from responsibility. Listen to me. The life you are praying for is often attached to the habits you are resisting. The dream you admire is usually built by the discipline you avoid. The confidence you want is born in the repetitions you are tempted to skip. There is no shortcut around becoming. You do not become powerful by accident. You become powerful by practice. Practice saying no when no is necessary. Practice leaving what weakens you. Practice keeping promises to yourself. Practice ending conversations that drain your spirit. Practice showing up on the hard days. Practice speaking to yourself with kindness instead of contempt. Practice giving your mind a direction before the world gives it a distraction. Practice being the same person in private that you wish to be in public. Practice not needing to be acknowledged for every good thing you do. That is how confidence grows roots. And confidence with roots can withstand storms. I want you to understand something profound. Confidence is not arrogance, and it is not noise. Confidence is a calm certainty built on repeated evidence. It is the result of surviving what could have broken you and learning from what did not kill you. It is the quiet knowledge that you can handle what life brings because you have already handled hard things. Confidence says, I know who I am, even if the room does not agree. Confidence says, I do not need to compete with shadows. Confidence says, I do not have to scream my worth to be worthy. And confidence is contagious. When you carry yourself with confidence, your posture changes, your voice changes, your choices change, and the world begins to respond differently. But let me be clear, real confidence is never built by pretending. It is built by facing yourself honestly. It is built when you admit, I have been too available. It is built when you admit, I have been too dependent on outside approval. It is built when you admit, I have been tolerating what I should have rejected. It is built when you admit, I have been calling crumbs a meal. It is built when you admit, I have been living too small for the size of my own soul. That honesty can hurt, but it heals, because healing begins the moment self-deception ends. And once healing begins, you start to understand why the absence of certain people was necessary. Not every departure is a punishment. Not every ending is a tragedy. Some endings are protection. Some losses are rescue. Some closed doors are mercy in disguise. We often cry for what left, only to later realize that what left made room for what we needed. If a person could not honor you in the season when you were pouring your heart out, then maybe their departure was the only language they could understand. Sometimes life has to remove a distraction before it can reveal a destiny. So do not curse every goodbye. Some goodbyes are gifts, and yes, the ones who lost you may feel it every night. They may lie awake and remember your consistency. They may remember the way you made things easier, lighter, stronger, steadier. They may remember your patience after they misunderstood your worth. They may remember the warmth you brought into rooms that were cold with indifference. They may remember the loyalty they assumed would never leave. But their regret is not your responsibility. Their emptiness is not your assignment. Their realization is not your reason to return. You are not meant to go back to prove a point. You are meant to go forward and become the point. That is what a mature person understands. A mature person does not return to every fire just because it once felt like home. A mature person does not reopen every wound just because someone finally noticed the scar. A mature person does not confuse being missed with being respected. Missing you after losing you does not always mean they deserved you while they had you. Sometimes people only appreciate the cost of neglect when the bill finally arrives. But you do not have to go back to the same table just because someone has learned to hunger after the feast is over. Your life is too precious for recycled pain. Your heart is too valuable for repeated disrespect. Your future is too important to keep negotiating with the past. So stand up in your spirit. Stand up in your mind. Stand up in your habits. Stand up in your standards. Stand up in your vision. There is a strength in you that was never destroyed, only delayed. There is a voice in you that was never silenced, only buried beneath too much compromise. There is a life in you that has not yet fully emerged because too much energy was spent surviving what should have been released. But today, release it. Release the old expectations. Release the need to be understood by everyone. Release the need to be validated by people who were never capable of seeing all of you. Release the story that said you were too much. Release the lie that said your worth depends on being wanted. You are not too much. You were simply too much for the wrong room. And when you enter the right room, the right people will not ask you to be less of yourself. They will not ask you to dim. They will not ask you to apologize for your depth. They will not ask you to hide your ambition. They will not ask you to lower your standards to make their laziness comfortable. The right room will feel like truth. But until you reach that room, keep growing, keep sharpening, keep walking, keep refusing the temptation to settle for what only flatters the wound but never heals it. Because some of you are not being prepared for comfort. You are being prepared for significance. And significance demands character. It demands that you become the kind of person who can carry success without becoming arrogant, who can endure rejection without becoming bitter, who can be alone without becoming desperate, who can be admired without becoming dependent, who can be misunderstood without collapsing into self-doubt. That kind of person does not happen overnight. That person is built through 1,000 quiet decisions to respect yourself when it would have been easier not to. Through 1,000 refusals to betray your conscience for popularity. Through 1,000 mornings where discipline won over feeling. Through 1,000 nights where peace won over drama. This is why the nights matter, because night reveals what daylight hides. Night reveals what noise conceals. Night is where the lonely heart speaks, where the guilty mind argues, where the disciplined soul rests, and where the one who has lost you finally feels the absence of your light. But here is the deeper lesson. While they are feeling the loss, you must be feeling the rise. While they are wondering what they had, you must be becoming what you were meant to be. While they are staring at the space you left, you must be filling your own space with purpose. While they are haunted by memory, you must be guided by vision. Do not live as a monument to what others failed to recognize. Live as a testimony to what you chose to become after they did not see you clearly. That is your victory. That is your revenge, if we can call it that. Though I prefer to call it liberation. Liberation is not bitterness. Liberation is not pretending you never cared. Liberation is not becoming cold. Liberation is becoming unshackled. It is the ability to say, you may have had access, but you do not have ownership. It is the ability to say, you may have known me, but you do not define me. It is the ability to say, you may have left a mark, but you do not control my direction. That is freedom. And freedom changes the texture of the entire future. When you are free, you stop wasting energy on proving. When you are free, You stop chasing what humiliates you. When you are free, you stop shrinking for acceptance. When you are free, you start creating the life that reflects your standards. When you are free, you start to understand that peace is not passive. Peace is powerful. And peace is expensive. It costs you some relationships. It costs you some habits. It costs you some fantasies. It costs you the false comfort of being needed by people who never truly valued you. But what it gives back is priceless. It gives back your breath, your clarity, your sleep, your self-respect, your focus, your future, your joy. Your original self, that original self is still in you. That original self was never destroyed by rejection. That original self was never erased by betrayal. That original self was never canceled by loneliness. That original self was never defeated by silence. That original self is waiting for your decision. And the decision is simple. Will you keep living to be chosen? Or will you start living because you already have worth? Will you keep begging for scraps? Or will you sit at the table of your own life with dignity? Will you keep checking whether they miss you? Or will you become someone too focused on growth to be haunted by old approval? Will you keep replaying the past? Or will you step into the present with your head high and your heart steady? These are not small questions. These are life questions. And life questions demand life-changing answers. I am asking you tonight to leave the room of emotional dependency. I am asking you to stop negotiating with your own worth. I am asking you to build a life so strong that the absence of the wrong people no longer feels like the collapse of your world. I am asking you to make peace with being misunderstood by some, because clarity does not require everyone's agreement. I am asking you to become a person who does not panic at the thought of being alone, because solitude has become a classroom instead of a punishment. I am asking you to trust the process of becoming. I am asking you to respect the slow burn of real growth. I am asking you to choose discipline when emotion begs for chaos. I am asking you to choose purpose when distraction calls your name. I am asking you to choose self-respect when old habits whisper, just this once. No, not just this once. Not anymore. From this day forward, you are building differently. You are building with boundaries. You are building with standards. You are building with discipline. You are building with purpose. You are building with confidence. You are building with emotional independence. You are building with self-respect. And every brick you lay in that foundation is a statement to your future and a sentence of closure to your past. Let them feel the night. Let them feel the silence. Let them feel the weight of what they dismissed. But you feel the sunrise. You feel the momentum. You feel the power of a life reclaimed. You feel the strength of a heart that no longer needs permission to shine. You feel the deep, steady breath of a person who has decided to stop living in the shadow of what others could not appreciate. You feel the beginning of something better because the moment you stop chasing validation, you start finding peace. The moment you stop begging for attention, you start hearing your own voice. The moment you stop carrying what was never yours to carry, you start standing straighter. The moment you stop returning to what broke you, you start becoming whole. And whole people do not live as half-hearted reminders of who they used to be. Whole people become the kind of presence that changes a room. Whole people become the kind of force that no longer needs to be loud to be powerful. Whole people become the kind of soul that others remember, not because they were easy to use, but because they were impossible to replace. So rise with your standards, rise with your discipline, rise with your purpose, rise with your confidence, rise with your peace, rise with your self-respect, rise even if your voice shakes, rise even if the road is unfamiliar, rise even if nobody applauds the first steps, rise because your life is worth more than waiting, rise because your future deserves your full attention, rise because the best version of you is not behind you. It is ahead of you. And when the night comes for those who lost you, let it come. Let the silence teach them. Let memory speak. Let regret do what regret does. But do not go back to prove your value to anyone who had the chance to honor you and chose not to. Do not reopen the door to a place where your soul had to beg for shelter. Do not surrender your growth for the comfort of old familiarity. Keep going, keep growing, keep glowing, keep building, keep becoming, because the greatest revenge is not pain. The greatest revenge is peace. The greatest answer is not anger. The greatest answer is growth. The greatest proof is not your explanation. The greatest proof is your transformation. So stand tall tonight, not because they lost you. Stand tall because you finally found you. Stand tall because your life is no longer waiting for permission. Stand tall because your heart is no longer for sale. Stand tall because your purpose is bigger than your past. Stand tall because discipline is now your companion. Stand tall because confidence is now your language. Stand tall because self-respect is now your law. And when you walk out of this moment, walk as someone who knows that being missed is not the same as being valued. Being remembered is not the same as being honored. And being lost by others is sometimes the very beginning of finding yourself. Let them feel it every night. You build every day.